In this last session here, we're just going to have a more informal Q&A approach where we're going to talk to some publishers about their real world examples and experiences with digital publishing. This session will be moderated by Zoe Dattner from Spunk, who was one of the people who was instrumental in putting together the digital publishing guide on behalf of Cal. And I'll hand over now to Zoe.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. Now I'm going to segue into this session that we're having with Caroline Hamilton, Michelle Calagaro, Mark O'Neill and Scott Zarasinas. Zarasinas, sorry, I even cleared that with you before. Michelle and Mark from Text Publishing and Cambridge University Press, respectively. I'm going to direct these first sort of points to you because you come from slightly more, I suppose, traditional publishing companies. And my first question is, when did you introduce a digital publishing strategy into your publishing activities? And what sort of process led up to where you are now?
It's nice to be introduced as a traditional publisher. We have nearly 500 years of history in Cambridge University Press. I haven't been around quite that long myself. To answer the question, it kind of depends on which bit of the press's business that we're talking about. The journals part of Cambridge's publishing has been online for quite, well, what feels like quite some time now, probably the mid-2000s. We've had what I would call flat ebooks, sort of PDF or simple EPUB, in some form or another available for some time. But in Australia, what we I suppose are known for is our publishing for schools. And I suppose what started off as versions of books available on CD-ROMs became digital publishing as we're speaking about it today, sometime in about 2009. We launched our first interactive textbook in 2010, since which time we've done 16 so far, with another 10 currently in production. And the strategy came from a global meeting that we had in 2007. And what is surprising to me about that is that much of what we talked about and built into the strategy that we devised at that time actually still holds true now. And I think that's because as a publisher, what we concentrate on and what we do, what our core business is content, and not necessarily the delivery mechanism. The delivery mechanism. Got the wrong teeth in today. And so the process has started off as strategic partnerships, where each party brings different skills and knowledge to the game, but has moved through, in our case, some successful and some less successful acquisitions and original platform development. But for us, it's the content that is key rather than the technology.
Text's digital program is much newer than that. We really started in the middle of 2010, prompted by Kobo coming to Australia and wanting Australian content. And in that process, they approached us. They were happy to start the conversion process for us. We didn't really know what we were doing before that point, or we didn't have a strategy at that point. And they got us going with that, and then it just rolled on from there.
And would you both say that you absolutely have strategies embedded in your general operations now?
Yes, absolutely.
Scott, you run a company in Adelaide called Dr. Z Publishing that specialises in digital publishing. It's pretty much all you do. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I started the company not 500 years ago, but only 6 years ago. Dr. Z Publishing, as the name says, as Zoe pointed out, hardly anyone can pronounce my surname, so it's Dr. Z. And I created this in 2006 because I thought I saw the digital age approaching. It was also a cost-effective way of getting not only my own personal books, but other books out there around the world, and as quickly as I could back then. I take things a lot slower now. I'm a bit more thorough with what I do. But I also had to split the business into a distribution business as well, because I was getting inundated with requests from other smaller publishers and other clients to just simply distribute their titles. They'd already published it. They didn't need me to do anything else except put the ebook out on my platform, which covers about 100 retailers and about 10,000 libraries around the world. And I do this as a free service, except when a book is sold, I take 25% of the cut. So that essentially is actually what I do most. I mostly distribute, and I do publish about 8 or 9 books a year from scratch, getting the layout, the cover design, everything else that a more traditional publisher would still do, except the only thing that I do not do is then take that to print. So that's basically where I stand. So a lot of the issues that the more traditional publishers have had as getting their printed book into PDF and then into formatting into EPUB, I really haven't had to face those issues simply because I have already started as an ebook publisher. I do, however, have the issues of creating a EPUB and a Mobi Pocket for Amazon, because your iPad won't read your Mobi Pocket and your Kindle won't read your Apple EPUB either. So I still have those issues, but I don't think they're as great as a more traditional publisher, which has to clear a big backlog.
On that question for the legacy publishers, actually, I believe you're now referred to as, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you and also for your authors and just your colleagues in general?
I think that the biggest and most obvious challenge for us has been training and development, both internally and externally. Internally, it's training the less technically savvy members of the team, shall we say, in terms of both publishing and sales and customer service. Learning new skills in order to operate in the new world, but also externally. I mean, as a schools publisher, the sort of development of teachers and teaching, and making sure that what we're publishing is not just the right content and not just pedagogically sound, but is accessible and usable by teachers who themselves, some of whom are not necessarily technically savvy. And by technically savvy, I suppose I'm referring to my generation and not the young generation that's coming through. New teachers these days were born in the digital age and digital natives, and have a lot less trouble adapting to new technologies. But the entire market, there's a lot of trepidation about change. So yes, it's the training and development of internally our sales, publishing teams, but externally teachers and also booksellers who never had to be told how to operate a book, but do now need to learn how to operate digital resources and to on-sell.
For us, I think it was fitting it into the workflow. Text, we have a small team of about 20 staff, and just enabling that process from making sure we had the rights to finding the files, to getting the files converted and distributing them, and then including that in the sales and marketing cycle as well was a big job.
Just on that topic of sales and marketing, because there were a couple of questions about it in the first panel, and also to bring Caroline in, who's got a very long Mackenzie Fellow and Endeavour Travelling Fellow, Department of Publishing and Communications, School of Culture and Communication at the University of Melbourne. Social media. How do you think publishers are using it to what effectiveness are publishers currently using social media?
Right. Well, I have to say, I guess I should preface my comments by saying that I work largely doing research, sort of engaging at the fieldwork level with small publishers, and often very small publishers of the kind that are represented by an organisation like Spunk. And one of the reasons I was very interested in that work and attracted to that area was that I noticed that perhaps 2 or 3 years ago there was a lot of very interesting stuff happening amongst a lot of these very small publishers where they didn't have huge resources behind them, but they were still able to draw an audience that allowed them to continue to work. And in fact, in contrast to perhaps the kind of crisis mode that happened in the larger publishing houses when there was kind of a confrontation with the concept of ebooks, a lot of smaller publishers were thrilled to bits because of some of the things that you outline in that the comments that you read out earlier, the idea that people could produce this work with lower overheads, the opportunities for distribution were there was a lot more promise there in terms of reaching global audiences. So that's just to give a little bit of background from where I'm coming from. But with the small publishers that I've worked with, the thing that I notice is that social media has been kind of deployed from the get-go. And we think about social media in terms of online systems like Facebook and Twitter and, managing kind of blogs that are constantly updated and relevant with, material about new releases and so on. But one of the things that I found very interesting is that a lot of the smaller publishers, perhaps because they were relying on local audiences, were really taking that concept of social media and running with it on the ground as well, so that it wasn't just about an entertaining Twitter feed or constant updates on Facebook, but in fact they were actually engaging people face to face as well, and that they were slipping between the two of them very easily and very seamlessly. And that for them, at least, with the smaller audiences that they were looking to attract, that was a very successful tactic. So I think there's a lot to be learned there from looking at that approach, being able, particularly I think for drawing in bookshops as well. We've heard a little bit about trying to maintain those close contacts with bookshops and local bookstores. And I think that there's good opportunities there for relationships between small bookstores and local publishers to kind of keep conversations about books going via social media, but also bringing people back into spaces, real geographic places and locations.